Of all the cool things that happened over the course of the weekend, including the Texans defense and how good they are last night on the Monday night wild card game, one of the main storylines coming out of the weekend is the Steelers. So the Steelers losing to the Texans at home isn't all that surprising. They were an underdog in the game at home. We felt going into the playoffs that probably Carolina and Pittsburgh were the two worst teams in the playoffs. Nonetheless, the Steelers, they were both division winners, and that's why they got in. And the Steelers get a home game. So they're only a 3.5 point favorite. It moved around a little bit, or excuse me, 3.5 point underdog. It moved around a little bit over the course of the week as the game came. And what happened last night was a disaster for the Steelers on a number of different levels. And it was hard not to wonder. So the obvious take here is that, okay, is this it for Tomlin, right? Because we talked about it all season long that, if they've lost so many playoff games in a row, if they lose a seventh, if they get to the playoffs and they lose a seventh playoff game in a row, could the Steelers possibly move on from Mike Tomlin? And what would that look like? The hard part being, as long as Tomlin has been there, they've never had a losing season. That's a stat we've heard 5 million times. They've been 500 back when there were 16 games. So they haven't all been winning seasons, but they have not had a losing season under Mike Tomlin. And so he stays over that threshold every year just enough to be like, hey, it wasn't terrible. Let's bring him back, right? In the middle of not the middle, in November when it was when they were 6-6, and they had just been destroyed by the Bills at home in Pittsburgh, and fans were chanting "Fire Tomlin." They were booing the Renegade song, which is kind of like their defensive anthem, if you will. It felt like, okay, this could be the beginning of the end. And then the Steelers proceeded to provide some hope. They won 4 of their last 5 games. The only loss was kind of an inexplicable loss at the Browns. All they needed to do was win that game to seal the division, and they failed to do it. They didn't have DK Metcalf in that game, but they failed to do it. And then they finish it off by winning in crazy fashion at home against the Ravens to win the division. So they provided some hope late to where people were like, oh, dang, now they're going to get a home playoff game. If they can beat the Texans, like this could get super interesting about what the future of the Steelers is. And they proceed to just get destroyed. And the score for most of the game did not tell the story. I saw a funny post in the middle of the game where someone said, hey, I'm not really sure how to describe this game other than the Steelers are getting absolutely blown out by the Texans 7-6. And I know that sounds funny, but it's true. That's what it felt like, right? Like CJ Stroud was making a lot of poor decisions, turning the ball over. I think they fumbled 5 times, Houston, and 2 of them went to the Steelers. And then he also threw an interception in the red zone. So that was keeping the Steelers in the game, but you never actually felt like the Steelers could win the game. But there was this like glimmer, at least, of hope that like, hey, maybe if they hang in here long enough, Aaron, towards the end of this like amazing 21-year career, could do something magical at home. Kind of like what he did last week against the Ravens. And the Ravens are not as good of a team as the Houston Texans are, but you just kind of were almost holding out hope that we'd see something amazing down the stretch, even when it was 10-6. I think it was 10-6 with like 12 minutes left in the game, I believe it was, or something in that range. You still felt like, hey, 12 minutes left, 10-6. If they hang in here long enough, Aaron like could do something really cool here, and this is going to be amazing to watch. So obviously we all kept watching for that, even though the game was like brutal. It's a great defensive performance by the Texans, but it still was just like, my God, this is painful. And the Steelers ended up with 175 total yards on offense. They were sacked 4 times, pressured. I lost count how many times they were actually pressured, but 4 sacks, 63 rushing yards. Aaron had 146 yards passing, no touchdowns, 1 interception. He was a 51% passer in the game. And anytime he hit the back of his drop, it was that ball had to come out immediately or he was going down. Right? This is not the Aaron from 8 years ago where his elusiveness, like you take that same Aaron 8 years ago in that game, even though they're outmatched up front, with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, he probably still finds a way to extend plays and make just some miraculous things happen. But that's not part of his game anymore. He can still throw it, but escaping the pocket and making throws on the run is just not what he does anymore. And so it was painful to watch. And as the game wound down, they ended up losing 30-6, 2 defensive touchdowns. One was after an Aaron pick 6, and one was after an Aaron fumble, scoop and score. You couldn't help but ask yourself, I'll start with Aaron. You couldn't help but ask yourself, like, is this the final act for one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time? Is he really going to walk off the field after a pick 6, and that's the last we see of Aaron? Because he did not come back in after his pick 6. They let Mason Rudolph go. You go finish this thing out with a couple minutes left. Like Aaron's like, that's it. I wonder, right? And because I'm wondering about Aaron and what's next for Aaron and whether or not he'll play anymore, and not only will he play in Pittsburgh, will he play at all? Given that it feels like there's this transition, there's uncertainty at quarterback, you wonder, okay, are we kind of back where we were when they were 6-6 and the Bills destroyed them in Pittsburgh? Of this team is now in transition mode and might move away from Mike Tomlin. That's been the main topic of discussion of this after this thing. And a lot of people feel like, they're not just going to outright fire Mike Tomlin. It would have to be some sort of, hey, there's been an agreement with Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. He's going to, whatever it looks like. Like, it's hard not to wonder if this is it for Mike Tomlin. However they position it to us, however they break the news, however they make the arrangement, that's irrelevant. I just wonder if this is it. And the fact that the Ravens did it after 18 years with John Harbaugh, to me, almost, especially it's a division team, almost feel like it creates this, like, in a funny way, this almost like this opening of like, now is the time, right? Ravens just did it.
Yeah, they did it. We should do it.
Might make sense for us to also pull the trigger here and try to pressure Mike to do this. And then that might also involve us just saying, hey, Aaron was on a 1-year deal. Let's also move on from Aaron and try to restart this thing and stop putting, I guess what I'm getting at is like, stop putting Band-Aids on problems.
Yeah. And
really get to the foundation thing. Maybe it results in us having a 1 or 2 years of it's a little bit rough, but you're going to have to reset this thing at some point and allow yourself to build this thing from the ground up and just accept that, hey, maybe next year we have a losing season and we break that streak of who cares, right? Or you just want to be mediocre and be 9-8 every year? Or are you trying to really get over the top and get back to where you're competing for a Super Bowl? And I think those are the questions that the Steelers have to ask themselves this offseason.
I think they're real. Yeah, I mean, they're real questions. I mean, we talked about it like a month or so ago. Is like maybe it's time to just have that hard reset where it could be a tough year, but having one tough year and then getting back and having a chance at the Super Bowl is worth it, as opposed to like having these years where you're just over 500 and lose in the first round of the playoffs. It's something that they have to talk about. The Rooney family's got to discuss. Just sitting here thinking, if they want to win a Super Bowl next year and have their best chance, I mean, what I would do if you're counting on everything is Mike Tomlin, Aaron Rodgers meet with the Rooney family, meet with Art Rooney, and they both decide they're coming back. Arthur Smith's coming back, keeping the cohesiveness from this year and building on it in year two. It is so difficult with a veteran quarterback like Aaron, with Arthur Smith, who's a veteran play caller, previous head coach, Mike Tomlin, who's been there forever. It's very difficult to every year change things. You're changing ever since Ben Roethlisberger has not been the Steelers. They just have not had an answer. And obviously Aaron Rodgers is not the long-term answer, but you can get a guy underneath him that you think is that and watch Aaron for a year. Maybe they already have him on the roster. I don't know. But I think if they want to win it next year, they need to keep everything in place and build on what they did this year. Because
do you think they can win it next year? Like, even if, let's say they keep Tomlin and they keep Aaron, do you think they have enough draft capital and cap space to go make a move to be competitive?
So it'll be like this will be the question. If they want to win it next year, is going a different direction with QB, staff, head coach, everything, going to get them to the Super Bowl next year? I do not think it will. But if you had that on one end, that's the direction you go. And then the other end is, hey, keep everything in place. Aaron Rodgers is back for his final season. This is it. Arthur Smith is back. The staff is back, and we're gonna build. We're gonna go into year two knowing each other now. We know how we play. We know what we did offensively. We know how we can get better. What we need to go to get in the offseason, what we need to get in the draft, all those different things. Going into year two, Aaron's last year, that gives him, in my opinion, the best chance to succeed next year. But for the long-term future, if you're saying long-term success, you got to reset everything right now. You got to reset quarterback. You got to reset head coach. And mind you, if Mike Tomlin and them agree to part ways, because legendary head coach will always be a fixture in the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, Mike Tomlin's going to get a huge contract to go coach somewhere else. Someone else is going to want Mike Tomlin to coach, just like Harbaugh. I mean, Harbaugh gets fired from an organization that he's been at for 18 years. That's very difficult. That's a tough situation, but he's the hottest commodity out there in the NFL. He's the hottest hire. And
that's
it would be the same. Yeah, and that's great for him. Yeah. It's the same thing with Tomlin. It's just long-term success or, hey, are we going for it next year mentality? And that's what the Rooney family. Now, if Aaron Rodgers is done, you probably need – I honestly think this is up to Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers is 100% done and said, hey, that's it for me, I think you got to reset the whole organization. But if Aaron's saying, hey, I want to be back for one more year, I really enjoyed playing for Mike Tomlin, Arthur Smith and I really made waves and built our relationship, and I feel comfortable with him calling the plays. I think you keep everything intact for one more year. But those are discussions they'll have internally. That's just me looking at it from above, not knowing what's within their walls, but that's what I would do.
If their goal is to win, if their goal is to get back to the mountaintop and win a Super Bowl in the next 5-6 years, because it's not going to happen next year.
You got to reset now.
You have to reset now. And if I were in charge of this team, I would immediately be talking to Mike Tomlin and tell him, I understand that if he's unwilling to come to an agreement, and he's basically daring you to all out fire him, that's tough as well. But my plan would be to say, Mike, we want to go a different direction, right? And I somehow tried to come to an agreement with him that let's just agree to settle your contract and have you, or maybe even, because remember, coaches can be traded too, right? Like when you're under contract, you can trade coaches for draft capital. I mean, that's an option too, especially if he's under contract. But I would, let me be real clear too. I think the decision to go get Aaron Rodgers in hindsight was a success. This team ended up 10-7 on the season, right? So and it provided some excitement. It wasn't always perfect, but that ended up being the right decision based on where they were at. They weren't going to go into this season with Russell Wilson as their starter, right? They ended up shedding him and going to get Aaron. And that made a lot of sense. And in a lot of ways it worked out for them. It provided hope, and there were some high points this year. But if this team wants to get out of this rut of kind of being good but not great, and this team prides itself on Super Bowls, this organization does, historically speaking, I think they need to basically start from scratch. And they need to be willing to accept the fact that the next 1 or 2 seasons might be losing seasons as we try to rebuild this thing. And unfortunately, I think if you bring back Tomlin and Aaron Rodgers, it's just, okay, you guys will probably finish right around 500, maybe a little bit better. But this roster is not good enough for that. You know what I mean? It's not all Aaron's fault. Yeah, he's aging. He doesn't run as well. But I think it feels to me like it's time to move on. They've lost 7 straight playoff games.
Yeah,
7 straight.
So a little bit about his contract is he signed an extension. It looks like this next season would be the last year, the penultimate year of his deal. And it looks like there is a no trade clause in his deal. And supposedly there's a team option on the contract that needs to be exercised by March 1st, 2026. Maybe it extends the contract or something like that. But this is just stating that if it is not exercised, then this would be the last year of his deal. So if there was a good time to reset, it would probably be right now because there's only 1 year left on his deal, and this is when you do it. I think all signs show to a reset. I think Aaron's probably done. But the only thing is I think the hardest thing for him is ending your career on a pick six. For him, that might be difficult, or he might not care about it. I mean, he might have enjoyed this year so much, and he found the love of the game again that he lost in the New York Jets, which a lot of quarterbacks do. He might want one more year because he believes in Tomlin and believes what they do, but that'll be Aaron Rodgers having a conversation with the Rooney family saying, I like what's in place. I believe we can get over the hump. I think one more year together, we can do it. That might be the conversation that keeps everyone in place, but I think Aaron Rodgers is the key to this whole thing staying together or resetting.
Yeah, look, so much of when we talk about a team resetting and rebuilding, so much of that is dependent upon the quarterback position, right? All the teams this year, we talked a lot about, there's new blood in the playoffs this year. The teams that have turned a corner, so to speak, like the Panthers, right? They end up getting more out of Bryce Love than I think even they thought they'd get this year. Not when they drafted him, because it dipped a little bit. He got benched. But after this season, they're looking, being we may think about extending Bryce Young at some point. He's done a great job for us. He's not a top 5 quarterback, but he's a good player. Right? And you look at the Bears and Caleb Williams, and you look at the Packers, Jordan Love, right? Having him as part of that transition, even though Packers have some work to do, I think they have their quarterback of the future. They've already signed him to indicate that. Trevor Lawrence, even though that was a little bit delayed, he's the guy there, right? And Drake May is probably the most obvious one. So these teams all, as part of a rebuild, find that guy. And so I think the challenge for the Steelers is you're not going to have a draft position unless you move around or find a way to get lucky on a guy. You're not going to have a draft position to have that guy, right? So that's the tough part is if you don't bring Aaron back, a lot of your rebuild is going to be around how do we strategically put ourselves in a position to go get that guy that we center this whole thing around. No one ever goes about a rebuild and feeling good about anything unless they have the quarterback of the future. So how do the Steelers find that guy? That's going to be a huge challenge for them. I don't know how that's going to happen this offseason, but it's part of the deal.
Well, I think that's where they've struggled and they've really put themselves behind the 8 ball is they should have gone out there and found a guy, especially with like the veteran guys, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. The only thing I can think of is if you think Will Howard, the guy you drafted from Ohio State, is the guy, then you might have an opportunity to rebuild. But if you don't, then you're sort of in a bad situation. That's why
the swing they took though was probably Kenny Pickett. They drafted him in the first round.
Yeah.
Right. And when you take a quarterback in the first round, you're kind of thinking like this is the future of the position for us. And he's not even on the roster anymore. Right.
No, I know.
So like they swung and missed there. Can you get good quarterbacks at the end of the first round? Absolutely. Can you get good quarterbacks at the beginning of the second round? Absolutely. I mean, the Eagles franchise quarterback was a second round pick. That's unlikely, but it's possible. So how do you do that if you're the Steelers? Because you've been just good enough to not really give yourself the opportunity to get the draft capital unless you're going to mortgage the farm and say, hey, to move up in the first round, we're going to have to give up our first round pick, our second round pick, and a few talented guys on our roster to go all in on finding that centerpiece moving forward. And we have to accept we're probably not going to be very good for a couple years because we've got to go get that centerpiece first. It's tough where they are. It's a tough place. It's a tough place to live.
And the important point we're making, there might be some listeners out there be like, whoa, guys, like, what about the Bears and the Jaguars? Like, this was supposed to be like a reset year, new coach, first-time coaches.
High draft picks, and they have the quarterback of the future.
And that's my point, is you got to see the context of the situation. Like, the Steelers don't have that. They're really in a tough situation. So they just really haven't been – ever since Ben left, Roethlisberger, like, it seems like they just really haven't had a great plan. Like, They were so
unwilling to hit reset. That's
like
the
Ben
problem.
Roethlisberger was such a key to that long-term success. Ben was constantly. I mean, I went against Ben and saw him whether I was backing up or playing or whatever. That guy made plays. He made throws. He was the one leading the charge. You were stable. You were spoiled. And since then, you have not had an answer. And I know Ben's still in that community. Like, everyone now is bringing in ex-quarterbacks that meant a lot to their franchise. Matt Ryan just named the team president for the Atlanta Falcons. Why don't you bring in Ben Roethlisberger? Like, bring him back to the facility. Like, help him, have him help you find the quarterback of the future. Ask him what he thinks about the opinions of what should happen. I mean, he got to see it within the walls. He means a lot to your franchise. Like, if there is a reset, like, have him help you tutor that young guy, be in the facility, like, have the face. Someone that, I mean, Ben's one of those guys, because of what he's done, people are going to listen to, and then it's up to him to have the words and wisdom to impact. So I think the league's taken a turn with, like, getting these ex-players, these ex-quarterbacks that have done a great job and represent these organizations well to help them make decisions from a player perspective.
Nick, planning for the future while you're good takes a lot of discipline. And so I like to go back to the Packers, and I realize the Packers have been a 7 seed for 3 straight years, and there's questions about Matt LaFleur, but their roster is solid, right? And when they drafted Jordan Love, their franchise quarterback, which the Steelers don't have right now. I mean, Aaron was a stopgap, basically, right? When they drafted Jordan Love, they got a lot of criticism for that. And I would make the analogy to, when you're in your peak earning years, in whatever career you're in, talking to any of our listeners out there, and instead of spending all your money every year, you're like, you know what? I'm going to take this chunk of it and I'm going to put it away in my 401k every year. It takes discipline, right? There's things you'd rather do that are more fun right now, but you know what? I'm going to be a little bit more boring, and I'm going to take a chunk of it every year and put it into a 401k because I know it's going to pay off down the road. In a way, that's what teams like the Packers do. And the Steelers, don't get me wrong, I don't think they're a poorly run organization. There's a lot of discipline there and consistency for a reason, but when it comes to quarterback, instead of planning for the future, like the Packers did, and prioritizing the future 3 years in advance, they have just said in life after Ben, we're just going to keep reaching for, well, I guess they did draft Kenny Pickett. That was a try, but I never felt good about that even when they did it. They just keep reaching for short-term Band-Aids to their problems. And Aaron's a pretty cool Band-Aid. He made it fun, but the reality is he's not the long-term answer and didn't get you a playoff win and is not your answer for the future. And now you're left kind of wondering, what does this look like? Because we don't really have the money to go or the capital to go get the guy we really feel is going to help turn us around until we allow ourselves to hit rock bottom because of the way we've handled this. So in a way, I'm admiring stability, which I always do when it comes to organizations, but I'm also sort of criticizing that they didn't find the answer along the way and instead just kept looking for quick fixes. They didn't go build that 401k, right, to be ready for the next step of their life, if you will. You know what I mean?
And I think I know 100% what you mean. I think who does a great job of that is Howie Roseman and the Eagles. They've always done a great job of that. Howie's
They're
very
always thinking
aggressive.
2 to 3 years ahead. Always.
Ever since he got reinstated after the Chip Kelly era, he's just been on a warpath of getting the best talent. They just look at the best players. They don't.
Yeah.
They're always
You know what
trying
the Steelers remind me of is like if you're I'm gonna let you go on the Eagles in a second, but the Steelers remind me of like you got a loan on your house and it's an interest only loan, so you're not paying down principal at all. And you get to the end of the 5-year fixed rate period and your interest rate all of a sudden just ballooned and you're like, damn, I should have paid down principal over the course of that loan. Now this thing's too damn expensive. I didn't have any discipline to pay this down. Now I have this thing that's just every year it's eating at me because I know it's coming. The Steelers are basically there.
Yeah.
They haven't paid down any
And it's
principal.
here.
They have this ballooning loan, and they're like, damn it, like now what do we do? Right? Whereas other teams along the way were like, I'm going to put a little bit towards the principal. I'm going to pay down this loan. So by the time we get to the end of this 5-year period, my interest rate goes up. Now my loan's at 0 and I feel good. I'm free and clear. I can do whatever I want. The Steelers didn't do that. And you hope it pays off and gets you a Super Bowl. And you can like, well, I can justify it because we got a Super Bowl because of it. Didn't happen. And so now they're in this tough spot where it's like, damn, now we've got all these loans coming due and we're not really sure how we're going to pay them off. This is like an analogy, metaphorically speaking.
No,
right?
I mean, I love the analogy. I think our show with Richard Sherman really impacted you with the analogies. You've come with a
Analogies are
couple. Yeah, he
Yeah.
has some great ones, and now you're bringing them. I love analogies. I love
right.
them.
So the Steelers, it's decision time for the Steelers, and I'll be very anxious to follow, and we'll talk plenty about it over the coming weeks of what that looks like. A, does Tomlin stay? B, does not necessarily in this order. Does Aaron Rodgers stay? And then that will indicate to us what this team's plan is. Are we hitting reset, or are we still trying to just hang around and compete for a division title, but never really be taken seriously as a title contender, right? Because it's been a while since we felt that way about the Steelers. So it's a special organization, special fan base. We'll see where it goes. Should be fun to follow.
Yeah, we'll see where